Welcome to the Growth Over Grades podcast, a show connecting you with thought leaders, pioneers, and change agents who are leading the charge to support schools and districts in making the shift toward competency-based education and to promote growth over grades. I'm Jordan Lewis, and on the show today, we hear from education leader and current superintendent of Shelby County Schools in Shelbyville, Kentucky, Dr. Josh Matthews. Dr. Matthews brings a wealth of experience to his role with a commitment to student-centered learning and innovative approaches to classroom instruction. Throughout his career, he has held roles in the classroom as a business teacher, assistant principal, chief academic officer, and most recently, as superintendent of Shelby County Schools. In this episode, we dive into Josh's vision for exploring how to better empower students and give them a voice in their learning using innovative technologies and pedagogy. We discuss strategies for bringing the portrait of a learner from idea to implementation, and how districts can take the poster off the wall and into the hands of students to truly promote growth-focused learning. Now, to my conversation with Dr. Josh Matthews. All right, Josh, it's good to have you on the show here today. Thank you, first and foremost, for spending some time with us. I know that you've had a busy couple of months. Before we dive into the questions, we're going to talk a lot about things like the portrait of a learner. How you feeling? How's the big transition been going here for you?
Yeah, it's going great. To be blessed to be the superintendent of such a magnificent district and a great community. Very, very supportive. I've said that from day one. It's not a lot of districts that you go to where the community is as supportive as they are here in Shelby County. So I've got a fantastic team around me. Great district and great community. I'm tired. I'm not going to lie. I'm a little tired, but it's Friday when we're recording this anyway, right? So it has been a lot in terms of trying to get my feet wet and get to know the community and those things. But I can tell you this, it's been a lot of fun. And when you're tired and having fun, that's okay.
It's a really good perspective to bring in for a lot of the listeners. We might be on the eve of their school year. They may be listening to this halfway through the school year and thinking, wow, I'm tired too. But if you're injecting some fun, it'll bring you a little bit of that energy. And Josh, I know we're kind of foreshadowing a bit. I love the idea of the supportive community. Well, we're going to weave that narrative throughout today's conversation. But before we do get to that, talk to us a little bit just about your background in education and how you got to where you are today.
Yeah. Well, I started out really teaching and coaching at the college level. Did that for several years, and then went into K-12 education. Went to Franklin Simpson High School and taught there, and coached girls basketball at Franklin Simpson High School. And then from there went into an assistant principal's role for a year, and did that, and then Lewisburg Elementary opened up, and Lewisburg is a preschool through 8th grade, about 450 to 475 students, and had just a great time. That was high free and reduced, so we had high poverty. Our achievement won great But at the end of the 8 years, at the end of my time there, we have been able to grow that school into the 22nd ranked school in the state of Kentucky. And so I'm very proud of that. That's not because of me. It's just because we had a great team. And we had a lot of teachers that were experts, that were willing to work and willing to do what was best for students. Had a lot of great classified staff that were so supportive and really the backbone and foundation of what we did, and had a good community. Had probably one of the best superintendents in the state of Kentucky, and Paul Mullins. And so everything just fell into place, and we were really able to kind of turn that school around and put them as a school that got recognized at the state level. And so then had an opportunity to go to the district level and be chief academic officer under Paul Mullins. 2 fantastic years. And then I was given the blessing of coming here to Shelby County, which has just been phenomenal. And And let me tell you, I really am blessed. I got a phenomenal team here too. The principals, my chief, he's an assistant superintendent of instruction. My assistant superintendent of operations, chief financial officer, they are so good. And I appreciate every one of them. We got fantastic teachers, support staff. So really, really blessed to be where I'm at.
And Josh, just, as I'm hearing you tell your story, you've talked about the team around you multiple times, whether you were at Shelby, formerly at Logan. And I'm just curious, it's not, there is a trend of you being surrounded by good people. And I'm just curious from your perspective, from a leadership role, how are you helping support these people to be their best so that you can lift each other up?
Yeah, first of all, I will say this, nothing is accomplished in isolation. Nothing great's accomplished in isolation. So if you ever hear somebody talking about, I did this or I did that, we all know that that's not true, right? We were able to accomplish a lot of things in Logan County, even at the district level where we were only the 8th or 9th district in the state of Kentucky to come up with a local accountability system and implement it, where we adopted 2 new curriculums. We did that because I had a terrific team around me. And so I think that when you have great people around you, your job as a leader is to support them in any way that you can. And that means that whether that's through professional development, whether that is to be an idea thought partner, or whether that is, to debate certain things, right? And to challenge people. Great leaders like to be challenged. They like for you to say, well, that's great, but what could we do better?
Sure.
Let's think outside the box. One of the things that I've always tried to do as a leader is to give anyone that's surrounding me the creativity and freedom to use their talent. And I think that's really important. So, I have been very blessed. I think about Sherry Whitman, who was my bookkeeper and then came up to be my administrative assistant. Here I got Kathy Davis as my administrative assistant. She got 30 years of experience. She's one of the best. And I'm just really lucky. But I tell you this, I'll never miss an opportunity, whether it's on this podcast or wherever I'm at talking. I always thank the people around me because they're the ones that make the kids successful. And this whole thing's about kids.
I love that call out back to why we're doing what we're doing. Obviously, it's for the students and it's for the kids in the community. And when leaders are in the trenches day to day and they're fighting the challenges and they're dealing with the budgets and they're dealing with the priorities, it's often easy to forget that priority, that we have to bring it back to the kids.
Yeah, it is. It's, you get so wrapped up in your segment of the world, right? Whether you're a biology teacher and it's about science and biology and you kind of get wrapped up, or you're a principal and it's your school and you're answering questions from the moment you get there at 6:30 till you leave at 5 or 6, right? And it's just go. And you're having to get this done for the state and that done for the district and this done for your teachers. And there's just a lot. So it gets real easy to forget about why we do it. And the thing that we all have to remember is at the center of every decision are the students and what's best for students. Unfortunately, look, there's sometimes what's best for students is a lot harder for adults. You think about your own children. Sometimes it's good for them to have piano lessons, be in basketball, do Cub Scouts, do all these things. It's good for them. It's hard for the adult because you're driving here. You got to pick them up. You're coordinating, right? But it's best for them. And the same thing applies whenever you're teaching or being an administrator or anything else. A lot of times it's not easy for adults, but it's best for students. And getting people to understand that and to be able to sacrifice for that shared aspiration, that's what leadership's all about. And whether you're in the classroom, you're leading a school, you're leading a district, that truly is what leadership is about. Getting people to kind of come together, and have that common vision, that common mentality for doing what's right and what's best for students.
Very well said. And I'm starting to get me thinking a little bit, Josh, as you're talking about the common vision. It's no surprise that the state of Kentucky is putting some really amazing work together about this common vision for future readiness when they've released the state portrait of a learner, and it's filtering down into these localized portraits of a learner. So I'm just curious from your side as a leader, how do you look at the portrait of a learner, and in your own words, kind of how would you describe this to a school community who might be doing this for the first time?
Yeah, so the portrait of a learner is really those skills that a student needs to be successful in the industry, right? And so we include our industry leaders, our business leaders in this process, along with our teachers. So you're bringing parents, you're bringing your stakeholders together, and you're saying, what are those skills that are really important for our students to know in order to be able to be successful? Now, those things are like critical thinking, communication, right? So, we have 5 or 6 here in Shelby County. There's 5 or 6 that the state has adopted, but most of them are along those same lines, right? Most people can agree that truthfully, a student needs to be a good critical thinker, a good teammate, so that they can do teamwork, good communicator, whatever it is. Those are some of the skills that are needed for our kids to be successful. Now, the thing that happens sometimes is we get to thinking that it is either we teach standards to proficiency, right? Or we're good at our profile of a learner and they know the competencies of a profile of a learner. Look, we have to teach standards to proficiency. Students have to read, write, be able to do math on grade level. That's the end of the story. That's our job. We have to make sure that they do that. And at the same time, to give our kids a competitive advantage, they must be proficient in the profile competencies. They must be proficient communicators. They must be great critical thinkers. So what do? You have to create activities in the classroom that not only teach standards to proficiency, but give students opportunities to practice these profile competencies. And that's where your relevance comes in. That's what makes learning authentic, and it's what makes it relevant. And that's really what not only the state is trying to do. Dr. Lou Young and UK Next Gen has been a big proponent of this and really has been pushing this for many, many years. The state has finally adopted that mentality and adopted a profile of a learner. We have a wonderful new commissioner that has been a superintendent and really gets it, and he's going to do a phenomenal job.
Shout out to Robbie Fletcher.
Yeah.
Big shout outs to Robbie Fletcher doing the good work.
Yes, yeah, he does. He does great. He actually came here, was nice enough to come for our opening day here in Shelby County and speak. Did a phenomenal job. Really big fan of his. So, but they're the ones that are really kind of doing the work. Now, Shelby County has been on the ground floor of this work, and they have really been a leader in the state when it comes to profile of a graduate and those profile competencies. They have tremendous defenses of learning. They've included their community. So I'm really, really proud to be a part of that, because that has been some phenomenal work that has really been led in a large part by Shelby County.
There's a few things to unpack here, Josh, and I wanted to just bring it back to, as you're talking about the balance between teaching to the standards, but also the competitive advantage of these competencies being brought in. And just with your experience that you've had, whether it be back at the middle school or the high school level in the chief academic officer role, how are you finding a balance between that, and how are you supporting the school teams in bringing a balance about the academic content to the competencies?
Yeah, so, one of the things that Paul Mullins always talked about, who was a former superintendent at Logan County, and now he is at E-Town, Elizabethtown Independent. Very lucky to have Paul. But, one thing that Paul said a lot is that you have to give teachers tools to put in their tool belt, right? You got to give them tools to be able to carry out good core instruction. Now, we understand when we talk about instruction that the fundamentals are the fundamentals, and you have to keep those, right? You have to have good learning objectives, good success criteria, good formative assessment. Those are fundamentals of teaching that have not changed, and those are just good fundamentals. But what we have to do is, when we look at our activities, we have to say, how can we, right, teach this to competency, have good research-based strategies, but at the same time, be able to give kids a chance to practice critical thinking, right? To practice how to be a good problem solver, to practice how to be a communicator. So whether that's through inquiry-based learning, project-based learning, Kagan strategies, right? Some of your thoughtful ed strategies that might be old school, but still very, very relevant and very good. You've got to be able to carry that out. And so a lot of it comes down to being able to give teachers those tools through professional development, through their own experience. There's a lot of great places that our teachers will go over the summer and do their own project-based learning stuff.
Sure.
So they really are getting a chance to be the student and participate on that end of it. So, there's a lot of different ways, but what you can't do is say, I can either teach my standards to proficiency, or I can make students proficient in the profile competencies, and we can have the great defenses. This is not an or deal. It has to be an and. And so when people say, well, you're wanting less accountability. No. We want more accountability. You're proficient and your profile, or you're proficient in both. So we're really more accountability. It's not less.
And I know you mentioned a bit ago with Logan County launching the accountability model and really being kind of thought leaders in this space. Can you just talk to us a bit more about that accountability model and what that looks like?
Yeah. So when we were in Logan County, we came really Brian Kreisman at Fleming County was really a catalyst of this work. We saw what was going on, and we wanted to be a part of that work. So we started to really think about, Paul and I sat down and started thinking about what would a local accountability look like in Logan County. And then my team, Amanda Kennedy, Megan Gaddis, started really setting down, Madison. We started setting down and thinking about what would an accountability system look like for Logan County. And we came up with 4 pillars, right? We had what we call the pillars of success. We came up with four pillars, and it had to do with social emotional learning, but it also had to do with proficiency on the KSA exam. It had to do with growth, both of our district assessment, which was a company that we went with, and we had a district assessment, but we also had KSA, and we measured growth on both of those. So we had this comprehensive deal. Then we partnered with Cognia, and Cognia is does a lot of accreditation here in Kentucky, and they have teaching standards. And so we would do our walkthroughs and really look for those teaching standards. We sent out surveys to our parents and our students, and that was part of that accountability data. So we took all of this, and quarterly we would report it out so that we were very transparent, and we would give our public, our stakeholders, a real snapshot of what was going on. And it wasn't, see, you got to be more than just a test. We were more than just one test, but the test is a piece of the pie. You can't discount it. You can't say, I don't want that, right? There are some nationally normed standardized tests that we need. I mean, let's be honest. We want some norm tests. When we go to the doctor, there are certain tests that are norm. We don't want them just making up whatever guide they want, right? There are some tests that we need. So that's a part of it. That's not the only part. That's a piece of the pie. There's a whole other piece of the story not being told. The local accountability system is about saying, here's that piece, we recognize it, but here's the rest of the story too. And I can't wait to share the Shelby County profile or the local accountability system. Dr. Adam Hicks and his team here has been working on it. Him and I have sat down and talked about a few things, and they just keep getting deeper and deeper. When we roll out the 1.0, when Dr. Hicks puts out the 1.0 in Shelby County, it's going to be fantastic. I'm telling you, watch it. He's a lot smarter than I am, so he's been able to come up with some great things that's really going to give our public an opportunity to see behind the scenes, pull that curtain away, and I'm really excited about it.
And for the listeners that are out here, I mean, you'll be able to learn more about the accountability model, whether it's with Shelby or Logan. I'm sure, Josh, they could Google and find it on the district site and things like that. But why it just continues to kind of come up as such a critical aspect is when you created that localized portrait framework, you engaged the community right out of the gate. And through this framework, you're continuing to engage the community. And it's important. You've heard their voice. You're showing how their voice is structuring what's going on in the buildings and in the classrooms and how it's impacting instruction. But what I just love so much about it is it's letting the community know you're still listening and you're still iterating and you're still making changes. And it's not just a one and done, and how this is going to continue to evolve. From your perspective, like, how did you continue to listen to your community and continue to make changes based on what they're saying?
Well, I think that you have to understand that a local accountability model is really a living and breathing document, right? That's never done per se done. And had I stayed in Logan County, we would have had a 2.0 and a 3.0 as you refine. You hear about what's important to the community. What do they understand? See, an accountability model is only as good as what the public can understand. Right. So if they're clicking on it and they don't understand where the numbers come from, or they don't really want to take the time to read 4 or 5 pages worth of documentation, then the accountability model is not very good. So we're only as good as what the public is willing to read and understand. Most of us, whether it's us or the public, are pressed for time. So we're not going to dig way, way deep and take hours to read. We need something that we understand, that's fluid, that we get, and that we as educators can explain in a pretty short amount of time that makes sense. So you're constantly building this. And industry changes. Look, we've got AI that's here. That changes the way communities operate. It changes the way businesses operate. We have profile of successes right now, or profile of graduates that were created before AI. We have local accountabilities created before AI. Now, at some point, we're going to have to go back and refigure that, because AI changes the game in a lot of ways. Right. Let me say one more thing too, Jordan, just on the local accountability thing. You know, and I told you in the start that that Lewisburg was at the very end. My last year there, 8 years later, we were the 22nd ranked middle school in the state of Kentucky. Okay. Now you would think, well, that's the proudest thing that these guys are saying that they did. That's not the proudest thing I have. You know what the proudest thing is that we created a system. We created what we called Ranger Academy. And our students once a month got an opportunity to go to the CTE, or our Career Technical Education building. And they got to take pathways. They got to take electricity, welding, drafting. You know, I had some of my top students in drafting, and now they're at UK and studying to be architects. You know, I had so many kids, 50, usually about 50 a year, that would go be part of JROTC. Colonel Mike Triplett, Tammy Triplett got all that started, and she talked to her husband into allowing our 6th, 7th, and 8th graders to come take JROTC. Can you imagine? They're up there learning about leadership and those things. Those are things that are going to stay with those students for the rest of their life. Those are opportunities that we've got to open up for our students. So yes, testing was a part of being 22nd ranked. That's great. You know, had a lot of hard work, a lot of great people that made that happen. But the Ranger Academy giving kids those opportunities, and that's why I say the profile, the local accountability is extremely important, and it is as important as teaching standards to proficiency.
Right.
Not more, but and they're equal.
I'm going to just, segue us a little bit, because as you're talking about that, putting the portrait and putting the standards on a level playing field, it is so critical to help. And a lot of leaders are talking about, we brought this in because we wanted to make the learning real world for the students again. And I think it is an incredibly important aspect. But when you're bringing this forward to teams of teachers and saying, okay, you have your standards, you have your outcomes that you have to teach for. And for some, they may have been doing it for 20, 25 years at this point. And now you're saying, and we're going to also prioritize this portrait of a learner. It can almost become a compliant checkbox. Look, I did it. Josh, you gave me the activities. I ran the activities, right? So I'm just curious about developing a culture around this in your building, so it's not just that checkbox, I move on to something else.
Well, what we talk about from day one is creating authentic, relevant learning experiences. If you truly do create in your classroom authentic and relevant learning experiences, then you're going to naturally be teaching those competencies in the profile, right? So we talk about that learning has to be either relevant or tied to emotion. Remember, learning is about what? Being able to recall information without review, being able to use information you have in unpredictable circumstances. Okay, that's what we do every day. So when you think about that, all right, we know that for students to be able to remember information without review, the learning has to be tied to either relevance, okay, or it has to be tied to emotion, or both. And so we talk about it from day one that we have to create those opportunities in our classroom. That goes back to what kind of professional development you give your teachers, putting all the tools in the tool belt, all of those things that we talked about previously. Because if you create those moments in your classroom, then just naturally you are giving students an opportunity to practice those profile skills. It shouldn't be an add-on. This is not a checkbox. It's not something additional for teachers to do. It is a way of teaching that brings the learning to life and gives students that opportunity to practice those profile skills.
I just love the call out that this is not something more or different. It's just a prescribed, a way of teaching. I think it's a really good way to just conceptualize how this is not compliancy. And Josh, a little bit ago, you mentioned this could take place through inquiry-based activities, projects.
Hey, hold on just a second. Let me say something to that too, Jordan. Just real quick. If you as an adult, if you think about how adults learn, and that's andragogy, right? The study of how adults learn. One of the main things is the learning has to be relevant to me. It's got to be important to me. It's got to be a direct tie to my job or making more money or whatever it is, right? But it's got to be personally relevant to me. Well, here's the thing. The same thing applies for kids.
Yeah.
Go watch it. I always tell this to our teacher. Go to a teacher meeting. Okay. Go to something that they don't feel like's relevant. You'll see them grading papers, being on their telephone, all the same things, right? But as soon as something is relevant, you start talking about a calendar or whatever. What does everybody do? Put their phone down, start writing. That's the kind of relevance that we're talking about creating in classrooms. Sorry to interrupt, but I wanted to finish that point, and you had said, so I just kind of want to piggyback on that.
No, I love it. I think it's the most important, and these models can often become a catalyst to so much bigger and better ideas. And we see a lot of leaders that said, the portrait of a learner was step one, but now we're running either competency-based models in our schools. We're doing personalized learning pathways in our schools. We're designing full comprehensive high schools based around capstone projects. And it all started because we just started shifting our mind around those relevant learning experiences, right? But what I'm curious about, Josh, is you did mention a bit ago how through the creation of these activities and success criteria, you began to implement a lot of inquiry-based learning and project-based learning. I'm wondering if this had any change to the physical spaces that your classrooms, how they set it up. Like, what did that do? I'm imagining it would have to change that a little bit.
Yeah, I mean, one, it changed our schedule. The biggest thing was
talk about that,
right? So it's hard to have a lot of deep inquiry or projects when you have 45, 50-minute blocks. If that's all you have with students. So it's real easy. If somebody says, yeah, we're a project-based learning school, we're inquiry-based, we love it. And you look at their master schedule and they got 40 or 45 minutes or 50 minutes for a time period, I start to question whether or not by the time they all get seated and get all the stuff out, you don't have a long time to go real deep into things. So I think the first thing is to look at the master schedule. How can we give kids time to actually be engaged? A lot of times we don't even give the kids time to get engaged in, right? So you got to provide that. Certainly, we at Lewisburg, we knocked out a few walls, made some bigger classrooms. Mr. Mullins was nice enough to allow us to do that. So we changed the physical space. The other thing that we have to think about is really a Kagan philosophy in terms of, group work versus cooperative learning. And so as you think about inquiry-based learning or project-based learning, those things, it really has to be in a cooperative learning environment. Group work, means that not everybody has assignments. Not everybody, I can rely on the smart person in the group and I can kind of do whatever and that group's still going to function and do. In cooperative learning, everybody has a job.
Right.
Everybody has a role. And so when you're thinking about inquiry-based learning, project-based learning, you got to think about cooperative learning. So all of that stuff fits together. And so when you say, well, did you change the physical space? We changed it some, sure. We got a little bigger and we moved desks around and did some things. But the biggest thing that we changed is we've changed our master schedule to allow for enough time for engagement. And we really started talking about the concept of cooperative learning versus group work.
I think the idea of changing the master schedule is so necessary. And I was recently chatting with a few leaders at another Kentucky school district. And in their middle school, as they started rolling out their portrait of a learner, they actually put into their master schedule portrait time so that it gives the students that opportunity to take a step back, look at what they're doing, and start making the connections and reflecting on it. And it just really got me thinking, as you were talking about those relevant and authentic learning experiences that lead to the competencies being naturally practiced, which I think pedagogically speaking is sound and makes the most sense when said. But then it just made me think, so if the students are naturally practicing these things, how do we get them to make that connection that, hey, what I'm doing in that real world experience is exemplifying this competency so I can defend it?
Well, I think the reflection part of any assignment's really critical. Now, and we worked with you a little bit in your company, Jordan, in terms of being able to take some of the products that we created in class, upload those onto a platform, and then be able to label those and say, that is proof that I'm a communicator. That's proof that I did some creative thinking or critical thinking, right? So getting that student an opportunity to be able to really have time to reflect, be able to label what they're doing, and it could have multiple labels, right? It could be I was a critical thinker and I was a great communicator or whatever it is. So I think that really giving students that time. The other thing is the defenses of learning. So it sort of goes along with that, but that defense of learning is really, really critical as well, you know.
Yeah, and just to build on that idea of the defensive learning, I know that a lot of these models look different. They're called different things. I've heard exhibitions, showcases, demonstrations of learning, etc. You've supported a K through to 12 model. Can you just talk to us really briefly about the scope and sequence you established for those kind of benchmark defenses that took place?
Yeah, so, we've done it all the way from 3rd, 5th, 8th grade. So we go pretty far. We go low, down in terms of the grade levels. Because we want to give kids an opportunity to really start thinking about their learning. So it goes back to kind of what you said in terms of thinking about how do they make that connection? Well, we want them to start making that connection pretty young. So we really started looking at, well, what would a 3rd grader understand, right? So they understand talking and communication. So that might be a good place to start. So we might not do a defense on all of the different categories, but we did it on 1 or 2 in the younger grades. So that was part of it. And then we built on that as time went along. Now, the other thing that we did, I think is really important, is we added a writing component to it. And so I don't think you can have a good defense if you don't have both the speaking part of it and a good writing component part of it. Okay. So it's really a capstone. It's a portfolio, right? Part of the writing, and it's this presentation. And so we built that. We built rubrics around that, again, including those grade level experts that are our teachers, parents, industry, those people to kind of do. And then you start to bring in your community to give feedback when the kids are doing that deal. So that's kind of the scope that we went through. Now, I have to be honest with you, Jordan. I just got a phone call from my son, so I was being a dad for just a second as I looked down. I didn't hear everything. Hopefully that answered your question.
No, you're all good.
Ask me another one, and I'll do it. But I had to be a dad for just a second. Make sure AJ was okay.
That's all good. I appreciate that. Hey, some responsibilities trump others, and I get it every day of the week. But Josh, we have a lot of listeners that are here that are either looking to bring these models online, or perhaps have a framework but are struggling to gain traction with it and bring it into their school culture, what advice would you give to some of these leaders who are looking to kind of bring this to a new level in their district?
Yeah, that can always be a challenge, right? So I think that's on several different levels.
Mm-hmm.
One, I think first thing you have to do is get your teachers and the people that are around you to believe in your vision. You got to get them to believe this is what's best for students. Now, I did that through a lot of different ways. Through going to UK Next Gen and Katie Martin came in and spoke. I mean, there was just a lot of different ways that we really try to convince and show through data, through research, why this is so important. Certainly having business leaders come in and tell our teachers how important it was for that to be able, for those kids. I think that's the first thing. You got to get your school community to understand the importance. Then the second thing is you got to get your parents to understand the importance. And sometimes they do and sometimes they don't. So it's really important that you start to build this culture, okay? Because once you build the culture, they'll demand that you continue to push it. They'll demand that you grow the program, okay? But until you build the culture, sometimes there can be resistance because sometimes people look at it as one more thing. And it just goes back to what I talked about. It's not one more thing, right? It's a different way to accomplish the same thing, but this is a different lifestyle. This is a lifestyle change. This is a mind shift. This is going down this other road, understanding that we have two things that are really important, right? And so I think that's the first, or a couple of things. The last thing I would say is we didn't get there overnight. We started with a really rough draft of a profile. After we attended a session at UK Next Gen, we come back and our teachers create this really rough profile. And we thought, well, what could we, the first year, we had what we call Genius Hour, where kids just got to be, really creative. And then we had a presentation of learning that year. And that's all we did. It evolved from that. So I would say take things a little slower. You don't have to have all 5 competencies. You don't have to do defenses on every competency you have. You can start with 1 or 2 and move it up. You don't have to start in the 3rd grade. Start in the 8th, start in the 12th, right? And then move it from there. So sometimes slow is a little better. Hey, and one other thing, I have a little trouble because I jump around. People watching or listening to the podcast are going to be like, man, this guy goes from. But, you were talking about middle school, okay? We were talking a question or two ago about middle school. And I wanted to make the point, can we get our middle school kids back to recess? Look, they're kids. They need to play. They need to run. They need to enjoy school. I go back. We had a lot of success with our middle school at Lewisburg. And you know what? They went to recess every day. They got 15, 20 minutes to go play outside. Let our kids go play. Let them have some fun. Let them be creative. Let them enjoy school. It doesn't have to be, everything doesn't have to be so tight and so, look, lighten up. Have some fun, laugh a little bit, let them enjoy it. Doesn't mean you don't have high standards. It doesn't mean listen, we're going to be disciplined, right? We're not going to just allow a lot of silliness. But at the end of the day, too, we're going to let them have some fun. Let them go have some fun. Get them outside. Let them have recess. I promise you, kids are going to be okay. I just had to say that.
So many leaders.
It's hard to even go somewhere after that, Jordan. I get it. I just had to say that because we're talking about all these things like critical thinker, communicator, all this stuff. Well, guess what? When they're outside and they're being able to create games, and they're being able to talk with their friends, and they're having to learn teamwork and how to get along. And there are lessons to be learned in that. Let them go learn the lessons. It doesn't all have to be within the four walls.
Well, I think you just nailed it right on the head of it doesn't have to be within the four walls. And so much learning happens when you're collaborating with your friends and you're getting that opportunity to bring fun and joy into what you're doing. And, there's a lot of leaders that we speak to. And for the listeners on this show, they've heard it from a ton of leaders saying, bring joy back into the classroom. Why are we not able to have fun and be goofy and laugh? Like, it is so true. And the state, like, it's tough to be in education right now. But if we just bring joy back into some of these things, I think we're all probably going to be in a lot better place.
Well, and research tells us, if you really want to get into the research of it, you start looking at the way the brain works and how we set the brain up for learning, and the importance of exercise and the importance of art and being creative. And even when you talk about inquiry-based learning, project-based learning, when teachers are allowed to be creative in some of the ways that they teach the standards and do some of those things. And I used to tell our teachers, we'd have really great artistic teachers. They were just crafty. They could bring that into the classroom. Your kids are going to love it. I see all those instruments, those guitars behind you. That'd be a great thing to bring into the classroom. You can teach math, you can teach language art, you can do it all using the guitar, right? And do different things with. So, that creativity starts to really help create job satisfaction, both for your students and for you as a teacher. So be creative, bring some things in. I think, we don't have to be very stuffy. Sometimes we take ourselves a little bit too serious in education. It can be fun. Kids can learn, they can grow.
I think that's a life lesson that extends outside of just the education world. I think every single industry can learn that lesson. And Josh, just as we're kind of wrapping up today's conversation, I'm curious from your perspective why you see initiatives like the Portrait of a Learner kind of helping to bring our education system forward to the betterment of student success.
Well, I'll go back to an earlier point on that. It really creates authentic learning. So if you're going to do that and you're going to do it at a high level, if you truly believe I've got to teach my standards to proficiency and the profile of a graduate, I've got to make sure that those students have a chance to practice those to proficiency. If that's what you truly believe, then there's really only one way to get there. And that is the activities that you do in the classroom, the experiences you give students outside the classrooms and outside the four walls, the opportunities that you bring to your students. Those things are really the only way that you take that next step and really are able to accomplish both of those really high level goals, right? So it changes the way we teach. It changes the activities we give our students, and it brings a real relevance and an importance to the work they're doing. It's no longer completing something to check off the box or to get an A or to stay out of trouble. It's completing it because I own the work. Bringing ownership back to students is the way you're going to grow students. And so that's why the work's important.
We're talking about bringing ownership, creativity, and fun back into our schools and changing the way that we're teaching to support student learning. Josh, thank you so much for coming on the show here today. It's been awesome getting a chance to catch up and to hear about some of the amazing work you've done and the new successes that you're working through.
Well, hey, it's been great. And we haven't been able to talk in several months. So
it's true.
So it's been good to catch up, see you, and appreciate you having me on.
Awesome. Thanks, Josh.
That was education leader and Portrait of a Learner advocate, Dr. Josh Matthews. Thanks so much for listening to the show, and make sure to hit the follow button on your podcast app so you never miss a new episode. I'm Jordan Lewis, and you've been listening to the Growth Over Grades podcast.